Members of the distinguished committee, very good morning. First of all, let me thank all the distinguished members for their very productive and useful comments and observations made and their queries as well. I will, in my honest, will try to, as much as possible, to answer all your questions. I will, however, divide these questions according to the subject matters of the question. Hence, I will start with the questions relating to the rights enshrined in the Constitution of the Maldives. We have one question with regard to on how the Maldives Constitution freedoms guarantees the universal human rights, especially in view of the provisions which says the Maldives constitutions are applied in line with the tenets of Islam. On this point, let me explain to your honorable committee that we believe that the human rights that are enshrined in the Maldives constitution is very broadly framed, and the Islamic human rights very much streamlines in line with the common universality of the human rights that prevails throughout the world, with the exception of very few minor exceptions. This academic debate is, of course, always goes on, but general acceptance among the Muslim scholars as well as the Muslim jurists is that, in fact, Islamic human rights were well before we all prescribed to the universal human rights as well. And all these rights are, in general, has the common features and characteristics as well. The Bill of Rights that are enshrined in the Constitution of the Maldives is one of its kind in modern Muslim world. It was drafted with the assistance of the relevant experts from non-Muslim jurisdiction as well, from UN and Canada and other countries. And that is the reason why we see that for the first time in the history of the Maldives, we have a very broad Bill of Rights enshrined in the Constitution, which gives very broad rights to freedom of assembly, freedom of opinion, expression, and freedom from cruelty, torture, freedom from arbitrary arrest and detention, right to speedy trial and prosecution, as well as investigation. We, however, expect that as a society, as we go on further expanding these rights, we will be ably guided by the developments that happens or that will occur in Muslim world in terms of Muslim jurisprudence on these elements. We therefore believe that there is no apparent contradictions with what universally acceptable human rights and with what is there in the Maldives Constitution. With regard to the question raised yesterday, whether the ground of religion and language could be removed as a step towards harmonizing these clauses in line with the Convention as well as universally applied human rights. As I have yesterday also highlighted, Maldives, being a Muslim country, very clearly stipulates in its constitution that the rights that are enshrined in the constitution should be interpreted in a way that do not contradict the principles that prevails in the Islamic jurisprudence, Islamic Sharia. That is in Article 16 very clearly explained. But the same clause, interestingly, also explains that these rights should also be interpreted broadly to harmonize the characteristics of a modern democratic society as well. So there is I believe that there's interesting effort being made by the draftsmen of the Constitution to include to what is prevailing in an open, modern, democratic society as well as progressive Muslim democracies. The context in which the Constitution was drafted involves a country which speaks one language, one has to understand the context. There's no compelling advocacy or debate in the society which calls for the removal of the provisions of language or religion as a barrier to the human rights because of the characteristics of the Maldives as a society. The next question also involves about a Human Rights Commission of the Maldives currently being placed on a B status and the possibility of it being elevated to the status of A if certain conditions are met. On this particular point, this is a long, my understanding is this has been a long-standing debate about one particular provision of the Human Rights Act that is currently in application. Again, here, there's an interesting constitutionality of the whole matter. Even assuming that this particular provision, this particular section from the Act is removed, we still have the Constitution, which is the main legal document of any country, which very firmly states every Maldivian to be a Muslim. So in that context, even if we removed the section or the article, the section of the particular legislation as being a Maldivian, you still have to resort to the constitution of the country, which obviously will prevail over all other legislative instruments. I will now turn to the question on the case of torture. Now, on this question, I was happy yesterday that honourable member of the committee has brought to our attention one of the reports produced, and of course we always welcome the contribution made by NGOs in our society. Home Ministry is in charge of that particular duty in the country, and we have been trying always to facilitate and to progress these elements within our society. Coming back to the particular question, firstly, let me also state on this particular point that the Maldives Constitution very clear a demarcation between judiciary, executive, and legislature. So you have, it's not an infused system. It is, it's not a fused system. It is basically a separation of power completely provided in the Maldives Constitution. Basically, the easiest way to understand the Maldives Constitution would be that of a United States of America. The modality of the Constitution is that of a presidential system of governance. Hence, any grievances can always be brought to the attention of the judiciary, and every citizen has the right to submit his or her grievances before a court of law. The executive will have little or no influence at all on the judiciary, in the same way the judiciary will not have direct influence, and the same way the legislatures. Now, the interesting report that was provided, and very useful report, I do admit that we have a history that we need to go back and study and see what we can do to avoid what we have witnessed in the past. That was the reason why, for example, Maldives has always been a very progressive society. The current constitution is a completely different document from what we had before, and earlier as well. And each document has seen a very progressive elements of rights and responsibilities. To the report, as Maldives' legal system do not have a limitation period within the Maldives judicial system and legal system, any matter that has occurred any point of time in the history could always be invoked before any court of law at any point of time. As for yet, we do not have a limitation period for both civil and criminal matters. So, in that respect, it would not be fair from a government perspective to cut off from certain period of time to a certain period of time, to limit, for the purpose of a compensation, to limit the compensation issue for a particular period of time. Because in the absence of a limitation period, you could always argue, and you have the right to invoke any grievances at any point of time. This is more so in the light of many unfortunate incidents that has occurred in the history of the Maldives. Going back beyond 1977, for example, there are major two incidents which I would like to draw to the attention of the committee, which the Maldives history notes with very heavy heart and with grievances. In one incident is known as Addu and Huadu uprising, southernmost two atolls, whereby we have seen many incidents of cruelty and torture. And the victims have been raising their voices since then. In one incident of the Huadu atoll, the Tinadu Island alone, the entire population of the particular island was forcibly removed from that island, and the entire island was destroyed at that point of time. So we have that kind of a history, and it is therefore compelling that when we talk about compensating to one particular period of time or one particular group of people, we should all see this in its entirety. And in a more recent time, for example, in 1988, there was a mercenary attack on the population of the Maldives. The attack took place on the capital, in which 19 Maldivians' lives were lost. And the victims' family still awaits the compensation. So as a government, we believe that since we have an independent judiciary, it is always, and we do not have a limitation period, it is always fair for us not to pick and choose certain particular group or time limitation or period. Rather, it be left for the victims to invoke these instances before a court of law. This is, again, important in the light of the size and resource of the country. It's a very poor country. Although generally It is little better than other countries in the region. Our budget, even for this year, is in deficit. And hence, any question of giving compensation in this regard by government's own initiative will put the rights of many others in jeopardy. With regard to deciding whom the compensation should be awarded, there is also the question of a legality. We will have, as a legal matter, we will have to establish first the liabilities or the compensation issues on a judicious and fair basis, rather than on a mere statements or assertions. So all these questions remain there. It should be through a judicial process, we believe, that these redresses should be sought. And interestingly, we have even now also, there are ongoing cases where more than 30 to 50 years old cases are still heard both in civil and criminal courts. So there are precedents that the courts do admit and do entertain such claims. Now, the other contentious issue, of course, is the question of death penalty. And on this question, let me tell the Honorable Committee that the current practice remains same. There is the status quo hasn't changed at this point of time. The only thing is, in the recent time, we have witnessed in our society a surge of crime trend. And as a very small nation, the entire country, I would say, is currently grappling with this trend of increase in crimes. It worries everybody. For example, this year alone, we have so far witnessed 7 murder cases for a country that is only about 350,000 population, not to mention all other kinds of serious crimes and drug trafficking. The country is really struggling how to address this surge of crimes in the society. And it is in the light of these occurrences that this whole debate has re-emerged in the society. There is no official government debate or discussion or white paper being tabled before a cabinet on the issue. But I must say there are scattered debates in the society, especially in the light of prevailing criminal offenses in the country. And this goes in every section of the society. Some members of the legislation do raise this question. In the same way, some jurists, politicians, and of course, the common people do raise the question of how to address this trend of crime in the country. Now, it has come in this perspective of finding a kind of a answer, a kind of a solution to increase in trend of crime in the country. So I'm hoping that as a country, now we have a criminal procedure code currently in the Parliament. It was drafted with the assistance of United Nations and with the assistance of a professor, Paul Robinson of Columbia University, and it was hailed as an exemplary piece of legislation for a modern Muslim country, which incorporated the modern Muslim offences alongside with the codified offences that existed in other jurisdictions of the country. So I'm hoping that when this piece of legislation passes, it will answer all other questions that arises. And the the progress of the code currently is that it is with the committee stage of the Parliament, and the chair of the committee has recently announced that in about 2 months' time he would be able to finish the work of the committee stage and send it back to the floor of the Parliament for a debate, and then passage of the bill will take place after a while. Now, there was the other question relating to the issue of inheritance. Again, interestingly, this is a question which every Muslim country tries to find a modern and progressive answer. And we have seen in some Muslim countries, they've attended to some elements of inheritance. The Maldives being a Muslim country, as we have said, we repeatedly saying it, the constitution very clearly subjects Maldives law to be based or to be harmonized in line with the Sharia law. And therefore, every law that is in existence should harmonize with the features or with the tenets of Islam. But again, here, the Maldives society has been making quite progress. For example, in matters of land division, the Land Law Act very clearly provided that there should be no difference, no discrimination made when the land is divided among the legal heirs, and therefore no discrimination between male and female when it comes to land matters. And land being the most precious thing in a society which has more water than land. Again, the regulation in the Land Law Act also provides, because under the Act, the relevant ministry is empowered to promulgate regulation. So the regulation relating to Land Law Act again provides an interesting instance where it says where a female dies or where a parent dies, leaving only female as legal heirs, the land property should not go beyond the legal heirs, beyond her immediate legal heirs, beyond the family members, beyond her siblings or his siblings. In other words, avoiding other legal heirs under Islamic inheritance law. So that is again a progress that is being made. And on this issue, I must say that in practice, it is very rare for Maldivian families to go on a discriminatory line between female and male siblings or heirs, legal heirs. Rather, always it is divided among them. They understand and they do it on an equal basis. So the practice is quite, in a way, harmonizes with what we all believe to be equitable and fair. Now, from this point on, I will hand over to Honorable Dunia Mamoon to answer some of other questions relating to social and gender-related issues. I will also always be happy to receive further questions relating to my answers. Thank you.
Madam Chair, distinguished members of the committee, Assalamu alaikum and good morning. I will touch on the gender issues that were raised and also maybe touch upon the issue of corporal punishment for children that was raised by some of the committee members. I think it was noted that some of the progress in the areas of gender equality and women's empowerment has been rather slow. I admit that the country has a lot of challenges still remaining. However, this is an area where we believe good progress has been made by the Maldives. Maldivian women, even traditionally, has been active in social and political and community life of our country. And in recent times, the governments have given particular emphasis in promoting gender equality and women's rights. This we have witnessed in the women's representation within been, while not substantial, it's something that has been given particular focus. and also women's participation in Parliament. Prior to 2008, we had, I think, something like 5% of women represented in Parliament. This is again an area where a lot of work has been and continues to be done. At present, the number has somewhat decreased, and this is an area of concern that the government is committed to improving. I think the question posed was, do we have public awareness campaigns, and what is the work that is being carried out? Definitely work through the media and also work through the education system is something that is that we are undertaking in order to change societal viewpoints and cultural attitudes to this. So I think everybody understands that this is a challenging area, but much progress has been made and continues to be made. In particular, I want to refer to the fact that the government of Dr. President Wahid, the new government of national unity has placed particular focus on including women in the cabinet, and at present we have 3 women in our cabinet, and more specifically the Ministry of Gender has been reinstated. This was abolished again under President Nasheed, but we believe that it's important to have a particular ministry focusing on the gender issues in order to ensure better women's empowerment. I mentioned Parliament earlier. Within Parliament, representation continues to be low, but we are heartened that even in the local council elections, a number of women did stand and did get elected into the local councils. And the political parties themselves are giving focus for training and addressing the challenges that women face in terms of political participation. I want to note that key bills adopted in recent years, such as the Civil Service Act, the Employment Act, and the Pension Act, gave careful consideration to eliminate discrimination, including that based on gender. And to strive for gender parity in economic issues, the government has introduced a temporary special measure in which 40% of the government-sanctioned SME loans would be given to female entrepreneurs. At the local community level, 4 women's groups have been provided with grants to kickstart their businesses. Finally, want to mention the fact that we believe that the enactment of the anti-domestic violence legislation is a significant milestone in the Maldives. The bill itself is very comprehensive, covering a wide range of areas, including prevention and also the responsibilities of the law enforcement agencies in terms of bringing justice, supporting victims, and also ensuring that perpetrators are, taken or go through the criminal procedures to ensure they are responsible for their actions, and also to help rehabilitate them as well. We fully understand that just having legislation alone is not enough to address this very wide issue, and in that regard, further regulations, awareness raising, and training is of particular importance. We hope that we are able to take this process ahead in terms of bringing in shelters for women who need them, and also really reducing this issue in our society. I just wanted to touch on the issue of corporal punishment that was raised yesterday as well. The Children's Rights Act specifically says that corporal punishment is not allowed for children under 18 years of age. And I think yesterday somebody mentioned that it was only education ministers sort of something he said or announced saying that this was not possible, but it's actually in legislation, and it is not a common practice in Maldives at present. I am aware there are instances, and as the Human Rights Commission report has marked, I'm happy that the Commission itself is investigating these issues and looking into it in order to ensure that we address any instances that are occurring and ensure that we don't see this practice happening in Maldives. It is not a widespread problem. There are maybe minor instances, and I think that's something that we do need to work on many fronts, and definitely the government is committed to working in this area. So I'll pass the floor back to the head of the delegation.
The CONI, whether the CONI will also be looking to the criminal elements that may have occurred in relation with 7th and 8th of the February. Let me tell Honourable Committee that the clear mandate of the committee is to look into the circumstances relating to the transfer of power on that particular day and events that has taken place within that period of time. But again, on this issue also, if they have found any criminal offences having occurred on that particular day and on that particular period, in addition to the CONI, if the CONI has found, CONI finds in its finding that there are such elements that has taken place, they may draw these to the attention of the relevant institutions in the country, one being, of course, that of the Modi's police service. And in addition to that, there are various other institutions that have the mandate to look into the criminal elements. This includes the judiciary. The Prosecutor General is empowered to ask for a probe. He can order a probe into any incidents if he, in his honest opinion, believes that it warrants for a criminal investigation. He can order and compel the Modi's police service to undertake such investigation. It's been given overarching power on this issue. And in addition to the independent Prosecutor General, who is appointed by Parliament and answerable to the Parliament only, the Modi's Human Rights Commission is also, I believe, is mandated to look and investigate into such circumstances, and in fact has the right to appear in such trials and can order witnesses and parties to appear before it. And in one of the recent instances, for example, the Human Rights Commission has undertaken such investigation in relation to the abduction of the Chief Judge of the Criminal Court by the former President Nasheed, and it has produced its report in relation to that as well. So there is a precedent on that as well, and the Human Rights Commission was asked by the Prosecutor General to undertake those investigations in the circumstances that was prevailing at the time. In his opinion, the Modi's police service at that time would not be in a best position to investigation, to ask that may have occurred through Modi's police force. Now, there was the other question relating to how independent the Modi's Police Integrity Commission. Let me explain to the distinguished committee that the committee is fully independent. The Integrity Commission is fully independent, as it is a common feature of some of the independent commission in the Modi's that it comes into operation through certain pieces of legislation. For example, in this instance, this commission was brought in from within Modi's Police Service Act, but the appointment and removal of the entire commission is subjected to the Parliament. The Home Minister has no role at all to their accountability, appointment and removal. Hence, it is fully independent body. The only function of the committee that relates to the Home Minister is they are required to submit their findings to the Home Minister, and it is understandable, the Home Minister being in charge of the Modi's police force, to what action he needs to take and what are the things that he requires to further improve and develop. The committee can make its recommendation. In its recommendation, the Commission also can ask to take administrative action as well as criminal prosecution. But in case of a criminal prosecution, again, there is a fully independent, full independence given to the Commission, in the sense that the Commission directly can send the case to the Prosecutor General. It doesn't have to get the approval from the Home Minister. And there are instances where this has occurred. In most recent time, for example, in relation to what has occurred on the 8th of February, there is one case already being sent for prosecution directly by the Police Integrity Commission. So, as to the ratio of the cases that is being sent, probably it may be because They may have recommendation more to take administrative action rather than warranting for a prosecution, considering to the nature of the circumstances and offences that may have been committed by them. Now, coming back, I just want to add one more thing with what Honorable Dunia has said with regard to corporal punishment. In addition to the Children's Rights Act, there is also a regulation which has the force of the law promulgated by the Education Ministry, which also prohibits the implementation or carrying out of any form of a corporal punishment on the children. And this is something that is not common in the Maldives, in fact very rare. And as a society, of course, you will always find instances. That is where you have to answer and further improve. And we were one of the, I think, few countries which very early on has taken action on this form, on this particular form of punishment on our children at schools. Then, yeah, again, yeah.
Madam Chair, distinguished members of the committee, let me touch again on a few of the other matters raised by the committee members. In particular, our reservation on Article 18, freedom of religion, and the question asked whether we will remove the reservation to this article. As a Special Rapporteur on freedom of religion has noted, being a Maldivian and being a Muslim have become interlinked and inseparable. There is strong public support for Maldives being and remaining a 100% Muslim country. Indeed, if anything, the advent of democracy and with greater freedom of expression and diluting of central control over cultural matters have intensified moves away from freedom of religion. As mentioned by the head of delegation in his introductory remarks, the Maldives maintains a reservation to Article 18, and there are currently no plans to withdraw that reservation. This is not a dogmatic government policy or preference, but rather a reflection of the deep societal belief that Maldives always has been and always should be a 100% Muslim nation. Laws, like government itself, must be based to a large extent on the will of the people. That said, I do believe government has two important roles that it can and will play. The first is to ensure that our laws and practice designed to protect the social and religious unity of the Maldives do not, as a side effect, undermine the rights of others, including, for example, foreign workers in the Maldives. This is why the government upholds the right of people of other faiths to freely practice their religion in private and to import religious icons and literature for personal use. The second role of government, in my view, is to promote and participate in national debates on religious issues, including women's rights and corporal punishment and other issues that we have been discussing here. Another sensitive matter is that of nationality, which is linked to religion in the Maldives. While the government is aware of international concerns regarding the limitation of citizenship to persons of Muslim faith, it is not our interpretation of the Constitution that people will lose their citizenship. This is because Article 9b of the Constitution clearly stipulates that no one may be deprived of citizenship. This is our view. This, in our view, limits the Muslim-only conditionality to foreigners wishing to become Maldivian citizens. These people would need to convert to Islam. However, this is merely our interpretation, and for legal clarity on the issue, a case would need to be brought to the Supreme Court. So I'll pass back to Head of Delegation again. Yeah.
Thank you very much. Let me.
Microphone, please. Sir.
Thank you very much. With the permission of the chair, let me again explain on the issue of the criminal sanctions that are available in the Maldives. There was, I believe, a question yesterday with regard to certain other forms of punishments that are available in the Islamic Sharia. This question was the question of amputation and stoning to death, whether these punishments are available in the Maldives, and if not, why only the punishment of flogging was carried on in the Maldives, carried out in the Maldives. Now, in this particular question, we have not been implementing, and we never implemented the the punishment of imputation and stoned into death, except in a long time back in the history of the time. But in modern history, it was never carried out. It has never been carried out. And again, it goes on to, I would say, to display the progressive thinking of the Maldives society, as somehow the jurists has been able to interpret Islamic punishments to harmonize the thinking of society. And the only form of the punishment that was retained at this point of a time, other than theoretically, of course, death penalty is there, but of course there is a moratorium. Then the only form of the punishment is transfer of power. In one of the questions is whether the name of current president was on the ballot alongside with former President Nasheed. The answer is yes.